This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the Urban Lounge, located at 241 South, 500 East, right in downtown Salt Lake City. Head on over to their website, theurbanloungeslc.com, connect with them on Twitter and Facebook, and find out about all of the upcoming shows.
Showcasing local talent, professionals, and everyday people, making Salt Lake City what it is today. It's time for another episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast.
I want to welcome you guys out today to episode 118 of the I Am Salt Lake podcast. My name is Chris Hollifield. I am your host. Welcome to my show. Welcome to the podcast all about Salt Lake City. IamSaltLake.com is the website for the podcast. You can head on over to the website, find out more about me, find out more about the podcast. I have links for iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Mediocre Radio Network, all right at IamSaltLake.com. I got a great show for you guys today. I sat down with the owner of Wiseguys, Keith Stubbs. He's a really great individual. Had an opportunity to find out a little bit more about him, find out how Wiseguys started, and a little bit more about the comedy scene. You know, I've been talking to a lot of the local comedians lately, just kind of been having a run of talking with them, and so it's been a nice opportunity to sit down with the guy that's helped so many of these local comedians succeed and find out his story, and let you guys listen in as I chatted with him at the Trolley Square Wiseguys right in downtown Salt Lake City. Before I do get into this episode, I want to make a really big announcement. I meant to make this in the last episode, but I completely forgot, and many apologies, but I am now going to be a regular monthly guest on the Chip and Jay Show, so you're going to want to make sure to check that podcast out, subscribe to them in iTunes, go to their website, thechipandjayshow.com. I was actually on episode 24. That's their most recent episode. If you're listening to this when this podcast is released, or just go back and listen to episode 24. I was on that episode. I believe I was on episode 19 as well. So check that out, thechipandjayshow.com. You can follow them on Twitter and Facebook. Really great guys, great podcast from Salt Lake City here, so go and support them. So with that being said, why don't you guys join me now as I took my podcasting gear down to the Trolley Square Wiseguys, located at 505 South, 600 East in beautiful downtown Salt Lake City. Let's get rolling. I mean, we're recording Trolley Square Wiseguys, right downtown. I have Keith Stubbs, the owner, what is your official title here?
I would say my title tonight is the guy in charge of the sound. Right, there's a show going on right now. Yeah. For those of you, I don't know if you can hear it. There's a show going on. We're backstage. This is considered the green room of Wiseguys Trolley Square.
My first time. It's beautiful.
Yeah, very nice. And on the other side, the actual show's going on. But yeah, I own Wiseguys.
Yeah, that's pretty. That's the best title there is, I guess.
I guess.
Yeah. So let's start at the very beginning. I mean, young Keith, when he got involved in comedy. I mean, I know you've probably shared the story a million times. How did you get introduced to comedy? What made you want to do even stand-up comedy?
Probably just, I was an attention-seeking kid, apparently. I'll tell you what happened. This is in the last week. I went through my report cards when I was a kid.
Okay.
This is pathetic, but this is how pathetic it is. And by the way, most comics are pathetic and sad, lonely clowns, okay? But I was in the basement of my house going through, the box of just stuff. My wife was out of town. My kids were out of town. I was feeling lonely boy, and I stumbled upon an envelope. I call it the death envelope. It was the envelope my mom gave to my wife before my mom died. It's kind of sad, kind of pathetic. So I started thumbing through it, and then there was like my birth certificate, baptism certificate, high school graduation stuff, and a bunch of report cards. And I grew up in South Carolina, and on the report cards were all these comments from teachers. And I started going through these comments, and I think that's where it started, because Keith insists on trying to make people laugh during class. Keith insists that he's going to be the class clown. So this was when I was 10 years old, 11 years old, and I was, of course, getting in trouble for that.
Yeah.
But I think that's where it kind of started. I got some laughs when I was young.
You were always out to crack a joke.
Yeah.
Be the silly guy.
Yeah, well, big family. Seven of us in the family, 7 kids in the family, and I was 5th.
So did you come from a Mormon family?
Oh, yeah.
You were raised Mormon?
Yeah, Mormon in South Carolina, which is even weirder than Mormon by itself. But Mormon in South Carolina is insane because it's Southern Baptist mainly. So we were already kind of rare out there. Big Mormon family, Charleston, South Carolina, and I was the 5th of 7 kids.
Like, who were some growing up? Like, were you into, like, watching comedy on TV? Did you have, like, comedic heroes?
You know who I liked when I was a kid?
I mean, especially a Mormon family. I mean, you probably weren't really exposed to, like, very filthy comedy.
You know what? But back then you didn't have HBO. You just had TV. You had ABC, CBS, NBC, and that was about it.
Well, you're not that old.
Yeah, I am. I'm that old. There was like 4 channels. There was no HBO. When I was a kid, I watched, I used to like watching Laugh-In. Remember the show Laugh-In?
It sounds familiar.
It was a show, Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. I liked Impressionist. I liked Rich Little. I like the great Fred Travellina. But my favorite comic of all time to this day is Don Rickles. That's my guy.
Great comic.
I saw him 2 weeks ago in Vegas.
Jealous.
Yeah, he's great.
What was that the first time you ever saw him?
No. I've seen him 3 times, but he's 87 years old.
He's getting up there.
Yeah, and I figured, you know what? I knew he was coming to Vegas. I saw this a few months ago, so I made the trip down there to see him again. He barely made it across the stage. I feel horrible for him. But man, he barely made it across the stage. He's really not doing well physically, but he sat on the stool and he just killed it. He was great.
He had the crowd laughing. Huh?
Vintage Don Rickles. So he's my favorite guy. And, you know, even as a young fella, that's the guy I liked.
So, I mean, you were a little bit older the first time you got up on the microphone, right? I mean, that's what I read that somewhere. You were a little bit older, exposed to the comedy scene. How old were you when you did start doing?
When I actually started doing stand up and doing open mic night and saying, this is what I want to do, I think, because I didn't really know it's what I want to do, but I thought I would try it. I was 30.
That's not that old,
yeah,
though, is it really?
You know what? It's changing, man. It's getting younger. It's a younger man's game. Everything's a younger man's game. But what's happening now, though, there's guys that are starting comedy that are 16, 17 years old, and they're getting better and better. I don't know why it is, but there's some really good young comics out there right now. But when I started, there weren't as many 20-year-olds out there. There really weren't, but there are a lot now.
Do you think it's more important, though, to start younger?
I think it's a good idea. I think as far as stage presence, but I can tell you when it gets down to it, I think you have to have something to talk about, and you have to have something people want to hear.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you're really young, you don't even have your opinions.
You don't know what you're about.
Yeah, you don't have life experience behind you. So I think it's good. I think it's rare that someone's really young and really good. And if you look at Louis C.K. and Bill Burr and all the guys that right now are the hot guys, and they're really hitting their stride now in the last few years, they're in their mid-30s or even 40 years old. And that's but it takes a while to get to that point. But there are people starting younger doing stand-up. And, man, I wish I had started younger. I'm envious of them. And there's some really good people out there.
So you were 30 years old. I mean, there obviously wasn't a Wiseguys around.
I was in Los Angeles.
Okay. So you were in Los Angeles. I mean, I talked to a lot of local comedians, and they talk about the first time they did stand up, they got up at a Wiseguys open mic. I mean, obviously that wasn't available for you because there wasn't Wiseguys, but so you were in Los Angeles. Talk about that experience for you the first time, like what made you decide, okay, tonight I'm finally going to do it. I'm going to get on the microphone and I'm going to get on the mic.
Well, there's a friend of mine named Jerry Mabbutt. I've known him for a long time, and he was doing stand-up at the Laugh Factory on Sunset in Hollywood, and he was kind of dabbling around at the time. This was like in 85.
Okay.
And he actually lives in Utah now, which is the craziest thing. But he was a good friend of mine, and we worked together at Circuit City. And at night, he would go do stand-up, and I'd go, really? And I was interested in it, but I had no idea what the process was or how to even get into the business. So we would go out, and I would watch him at the Laugh Factory. Now, the Laugh Factory now is a big chain, very successful, but back then, it was just truly a dump. Carlos Mencia was playing there when he was new. Pauly Shore was there. Even though his mom owned the Comedy Store, he would mess around at the Laugh Factory and go under a fake name. He went under the name Paulie Montgomery because he didn't want people to know that he was, his dad is Sammy Shore, who's a well-known comedian, and his mom is, of course, Mitzi Shore. So he went by the name Paulie Montgomery for a little while, and then he realized that he might as well go with his real name because that doesn't hurt. But he did that. The reason he did that was to try to say, look, I'm going to do this on my own. I don't need the family name to be successful. And then he went, well, maybe I do need the family name. And he went back to Shore. But my point being is that my buddy Jerry, he was doing stand-up comedy and open mic nights at the Laugh Factory with those guys. I would go sit in the back of the room, watch them. And then maybe we'd go down to the Comedy Store And I'd watch a lot of comedy. Before I even went on stage, I went and saw a lot of comedy and a lot of great comedians. And I would kind of...
So you would study them and learn, okay, what makes them funny?
Well, first of all, I loved it. I enjoyed it. And when you go to the Comedy Store, and it's the same to this day, I think the doors open at 8. It goes to like 2 a.m, and a different comic comes up every 15 minutes or so. So I would sit there and watch, and there were people I would see. I would see Dice, Kennison.
And this is before you did stand-up.
This is before I did comedy.
Yeah.
And I would watch him and I'd go, God, that guy's great. I could never do this. And then someone else would go up and I go, okay, I can do that. Even though I couldn't do it at that point, but in my mind, I thought I can get to that level. And then someone else would come on stage like Dice or Arsenio or Eddie Murphy. I'd go, I can't do that. So, but it kind of gave me some perspective as to what was out there and what the comedians were all about. And I watched a lot of comedy before I even did my first open mic night in Southern California.
But the first time you did it, do you think, I mean, did you kill it?
No.
Did you get some laughs?
No, it's horrific.
It was horrible?
It was horrible. And nervous stomach, and my stomach was in knots. And actually, I still get nervous to this day. But my stomach was in knots. It was horrific. But somewhere inside me, I thought, man, I know I can do this. I know that I can make people laugh. I've done it. I see what's out there. I know that it's in me. And I believe this is the case for most people trying stand-up comedy and most comedians. There's more failure, especially at the beginning, than success. But there's got to be something inside you somewhere
that just drives you.
That keeps you going. Otherwise, this is a brutal business. It's a hateful business. So unless you really believe that you can overcome the horrible sets that you're going to have and the bad experiences and the disappointment and the non-laughter, then you better believe, because if you don't, man, you won't last long.
So how long did it take you? I mean, did you go the next week? I mean, how long did it take you before you were finally like, okay, I'm getting my stride. I'm getting laughs. I'm getting my name out there. I mean, what?
It took a while, and it was very inconsistent. Every once in a while I'd have a good set, and those are the ones, it's like golf, you know, you have the one good shot in golf and it hits the green, you go, okay, I got this figured out. It's that one good laugh that you get that kind of keeps you going. I wasn't consistent at all. I worked hard. And I was really determined to be successful. I also knew that I was getting started later in the game.
So you had to just put yourself out there.
Yeah, there was no way I could dilly-dally around. Yeah. Like if I was 20 years old, you can kind of go, okay, I'm going to get into this and kind of mess around and formulate some ideas. I didn't feel that I had that luxury.
You didn't want to waste your time. You said, I got to do it.
Right. And at the time I started doing this, I was a stockbroker. So I was with Payne Weber. And I was in New York as a stockbroker, and then I was in Southern California, literally working for Payne Weber during the day. And then at night, I would go down to L.A. or go to random one night open mic nights all over Southern California and get on stage for 3 minutes and hope for the best.
Did you go to school for that then?
To be a stockbroker?
Yeah, is that what you went to school?
I don't have an education. That's a whole other story. The whole stockbroker thing?
Yeah.
The stockbroker thing, the way that came about, this is insane, by the way.
Yeah.
I went to college for one semester. I went to BYU, and I should have gutted it out, but I didn't. I have a lot of regrets that I didn't stay in school. And a few years later, after living in Southern California for a while, I saw the movie Wall Street. I tell you, this is insane. I saw the movie Wall Street, the one with Michael Douglas and with Charlie Sheen.
Great
and
movie.
I thought, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. So I went to Payne Weber. And I walked in to one of the local offices, and I said, I'd like to be a stockbroker.
So, I mean, that must have been a pretty cushy job. I mean, was it, a pretty decent job to get?
It's a tough job to get when you have no education.
But you got it, and you were doing it, and that's what you're doing. And then all of a sudden you decided to start doing comedy.
Yeah, I'll tell you the truth.
I mean, people must have just laughed at you and said, what the heck are you doing? You got a great job here being a stockbroker, and now you want to do comedy?
Yeah, it is weird. And my wife thought the same thing. And it is actually kind of insane. As a matter of fact, I think it's insane for almost anyone to say that what they're going to do is go be a comedian. I think that most people, the first time they tell someone dear to them that that's what they're going to do,
they laugh at them.
It seems crazy.
Yeah.
And it kind of is. Obviously, I mean, you can look and go, well, it's worked out for these people. I understand what you're saying, but I also know a ton of people that have done it, and it's not an easy business to get into.
And if it's what you want to do, you got to go after your passion.
And that's why I left doing what I was doing as a stockbroker. I will tell you this, though. I enjoyed Wall Street, and I enjoyed being a stockbroker. I enjoy numbers. I enjoy the intensity of it. So I didn't.
Do you miss it at all now?
I don't miss it, but I enjoyed it. So it's not like I got out of a gig that I didn't want to do, and that's why I ran to comedy. I wanted to do comedy more than I wanted to be a stockbroker.
So at what point did you leave being a stockbroker and jump into doing comedy full time?
Probably about a year after I started doing open mic nights.
Which is pretty crazy.
Pretty quick, too.
Yeah.
I was able to videotape myself a lot. I would do open mic nights. I started doing videotaping on these huge VHS cassettes. I'd put them in those padded envelopes, and I would mail them out all over the country to different bookers of one-nighters, comedy clubs, all over the place with a resume and say, please book me. And what happens, I started getting a little bit of work. I networked with some of the comedians that I had met in Los Angeles. They needed opening acts. I was saying, let's go, let's roll. And I did it. I was hungry. I was motivated. I was funny enough. And I was able to get on the road and start making some money. The money's horrific.
And there wasn't the internet back then to network on the internet to
it was literally
Facebook and Twitter. And
put it in the mail or get on the phone. But all that other stuff did not exist at this time.
So how long did you toured for quite a while before you decided to do Wiseguys, right? I mean, how long did you tour for?
I would say 7 or 8 years, but it was hard. I'm talking about
living in your car or what?
I did a lot of that. I never lived in my car, but I slept in my car a lot of times. I had,
that's living.
Yeah, it was,
I mean,
but I was doing one-nighters. I had a Geo Metro, put like 300,000 miles on it. Yeah.
You probably met a lot of really great comedians doing that, right? I mean,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Who were some of the comedians that you got to work with?
I worked with mainly road dogs, man. I mean, I hung out with guys and I worked with guys that had been on the road for a long time because I was doing various one-nighters up in Montana, way up into Canada, up in the British Columbia.
You were just going anywhere. Anywhere that you could get a job.
Anywhere I could get a gig. And then if I had a couple of nights off, I would call around to say, hey, is there I'd call random bookers. Do you have anything happening between Minneapolis and North Dakota? Do you have anything? I'll take it. I'll MC. Anything for a hotel room.
Now, I'm not really familiar. I mean, I've talked to a lot of comedians. I've come to comedy shows and I've seen it, but is that pretty typical with comedians still? Do they get out and do what you did and just kind of travel around and road dog it? And
there are people that do that. I wouldn't recommend what I did, by the way.
Why is that? Why wouldn't you recommend it?
If I could do it all over again, and this is, believe me, it's not hypocritical. It's just, it's perspective. You look back and you go, wow, I wish I'd played this differently. I wish that I just stayed in Los Angeles and continued to work on my stuff there and continued to audition because I had some pretty good success pretty quickly in Los Angeles. I got on some TV at the time. I got an agent. I did some commercial work and things were going. Then I thought to myself, man, I need to get stronger. I need to get funnier.
And you thought by going on the road would do that for you.
That's exactly what I thought. So what I did is I took myself out of the game, went on the road, worked really, really hard, 48 weeks a year, 46 weeks a year, all over the place, came back to LA and they're going, who's this guy? It was such I look back, it is such a bad move. I should have stayed in LA because I really had some good things going on. I shouldn't have gone out on the road as much as I did. And I believe that wasn't helpful.
So let's actually back up just a little bit. You mentioned you were born in South Carolina. Mm-hmm. You went to BYU for a semester. So that brought you. Did you go to the Provo, BYU then?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So you went from there to Utah.
Right.
Then to LA. What took you to LA?
Well, I went on a mission.
Okay.
I was a missionary down in Ecuador for a couple of years and I came back. I got married to a girl from California. So I ended up going down to California.
For the girl.
Yeah.
The girls do that too.
Because I was married and so that's where I lived. And at that point, I went to work at Circuit City and other jobs like that. And that's where I met the guy.
Okay.
That was doing the stand-up. So that's where that contact
I'm just trying to get the timeline here a little bit. So, I mean, was that tough? I mean, were you married when you were out touring then? I mean, was that?
It was not good for the marriage.
I couldn't imagine.
It didn't last.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, because it's my fault totally. It's like, look, when she married me, she wasn't going, oh, this is great. I'm marrying a guy that's a comic. No, it was
it's not every girl's dream.
It was bait and switch. And so that things did not work out. And to this day, I wish, I feel bad about the way things went down because it was me who changed the game. And
not her.
Not her at all. Yeah. And actually we get along fine, but I feel bad that happened. And because she didn't want to get married to the dude I became. And I don't blame her for that. I blame me. Now I'm married again and my wife now, and we live in Ogden. She met me
as a comic
at a show.
Oh, there you go. A fan.
So she knows the game.
Yeah.
So that makes it a lot easier.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
I'm sure it does. So what, like, at what point did you decide, okay, I got to stop touring? Cause that's kind of what happened. That's how Wiseguys opened up, right? I mean, you decided, I got to stop doing this. I mean, why? Talk about that a little bit. Like, at what point did you decide, I'm going to stop touring, but I want to open up a Wiseguys in Utah?
Well, what happened is that I was on the road a lot and things were going okay and I was making decent money, but not great money at all. And I knew I wasn't going to become a big deal or the guys making all the big money.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to travel like I was traveling. It was really a hectic, busy schedule. So I decided, I'll just open up. I had played a lot of different clubs and one-nighters and I have a business background. And I figured I could probably do this. And I'd worked with and know enough club owners across the country that I thought maybe I can do this. And that would give me a place to perform. And I won't be forced to go out on the road so much. And hopefully if the business is successful, I can make a living doing that. And I'm married and then I have kids. And
you wanted to be home with the family.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've got 4 children. I've got a 14-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 4-year-old. So I don't want to be out on the road like I was. There's people that do that and that's fine. And there's people that also do that like Louis C.K., but he's also making
a lot of money.
Millions,
Yeah.
So I didn't want it. That wasn't for me. So yeah, I decided to open up Wiseguys. And I opened.
And where was the first one?
The first one 12 and a half years ago, West Valley City.
Which is still there.
Still there.
So you said 12 and a half years ago?
Yeah.
And then from there, was Ogden next then?
Yeah, Ogden opened 10 years ago, like right now.
Okay, so you had West Valley City, Utah, especially back then, did you feel it was big enough to have that, 2 comedy clubs? I guess Ogden's quite a few miles from West Valley.
Ogden's its own unique little market, and I live in Ogden.
Yeah.
So I felt like I have a little bit of an idea what's happening there. So I felt like it could handle something not as big and not as many shows as West Valley or Trolley Square, but I figured it could handle its own little comedy club.
And then Trolley Square opened up. You actually had one in Utah County, right?
That was brutal.
I heard you had one down there. What was brutal about that? Just the scene down there or what?
Yeah, it's hard to,
Utah County is its own special place.
It's its own market, and it was really difficult. And you were always on eggshells.
Where was it at down there? I used to live down. I lived down there many years.
It was in Orem in I forget. It's not far from UVU on the other side of the freeway. There's like this big apartment complex. I forgot what it's called, but it was there, and I tried, and it did not go well. But it was very difficult to get people on board with it.
Wasn't there what happened to Johnny Biscuit?
Johnny Biscuit, I know Johnny.
Yeah, is he still down there?
He's still around. Matter of fact, I was talking about him to someone else a couple days ago. Funny guy, but he had Johnny B's down in Provo. That was a very successful club. He had a great run.
And how did that? Why was that successful in Wiseguys? Wasn't?
I don't know. I don't know. I think. Well, I'll tell you this. He really tapped into the market. He really tapped into what was happening at BYU, and that's the only place he had, and he focused on that. It was really hot for a while.
Yeah.
It was.
And it's not there anymore.
And I
right?
performed there many times. That was a great club.
Yeah, it's not there though anymore.
No, it's been gone for, I bet, 7 or 8 years.
Yeah. So starting Wiseguys in Utah, was that tough? Was it challenging? Were the people pretty responsive? Getting comedians, who were some of the first people that you had perform there? You touring acts, local acts?
No, I brought in national guys. I know a lot of the national guys because I kind of worked with some of them. But like one of the first big names I had was Bobcat Goldthwait. And
was the response pretty? Did people were there people like, wow, this is awesome. We finally got a comedy. Because you were probably the first comedy club in Salt Lake.
That's not entirely true. There were several.
There were several.
Oh yeah, there's been quite a few comedy clubs in Salt Lake City. There was a club called Cartoons that I've heard stories about. There was a place called the Comedy Circuit in Midvale, which closed about a year after I opened, and that had been going But
were they ever on the same level? Wiseguys, that's a name, man.
I didn't live here.
You got a name out there.
I knew about those places, but I didn't live here a lot during that, so I don't really know. But I do know that I had some comedians that have worked for Wiseguys that told me that they worked like cartoons. I think Richard Lewis was telling me, because Richard is also one of my favorite comics. Richard Lewis, I believe, told me he worked cartoons. And I think Tom Arnold did too, back in the day. Like, we're talking probably in the 80s. And I could be totally wrong, but they made mention of those locations, but I wasn't here at the time as far as being involved in comedy at all. But yeah, there's been others, but it's a tough business. I opened it with credit cards. I didn't have any money, but I had some credit cards and it was a big roll of the dice.
What would you do different now? Going back, like if you could do something different, opening the first, Wiseguys in West Valley, if you could go back and do something different, would you do anything different?
I don't know what, I tell you one thing I've done, one of the big mistakes I've made is that you got to be careful who you book when you book them. And it's not really the comic, it's the timing. It's like October. We're in October right now. I don't know if this is going to air, but you can't battle haunted houses in Utah.
Yeah.
It's insane. I had no idea that was that big a deal here. There's more haunted houses and corn mazes through here, and businesses noticeably drop. Business drops every year in October, but sometimes I'm like, who cares?
See, and I would have never thought
because I'm bringing in a big name comic, and people want to see this big name comic. They don't care about haunted houses. That's not true. They care about their haunted houses.
See, and I would have never thought that.
So I've made mistakes like that just pop you right in the face, and you lose a lot of money because these guys are not cheap that I'm bringing in. I'm paying a lot of money to some of these comedians. I mean, a lot of money to bring, I know the lineup at Wiseguys is as good as any club in the country.
Well, it's incredible. You have an incredible lineup. I mean, I don't, and you book them all yourself, don't you? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's amazing.
It's risky and it's scary and it makes my stomach hurts a lot. I talk about my stomach hurting, but it truly does because, a lot of people, not a lot of people, but some people, they think Wiseguys is owned by some big company or something, but it's literally just me and my wife and my kids. And that's it. It's just I'm not backed by anybody. So if things don't go well, it's me.
Well, and that's what's great about you. And that's why I say support you, man. You're the real mom and pop of
yeah, I don't know that people know that. I've been asked, so where'd you get your franchise? Like, no, it's not. It's just me, man. I'm telling you, it's just me hoping for the best. It really is. It's nerve wracking. It's very stressful. Owning your own business is stressful. Owning a restaurant is stressful because that's technically what these are. But one of my things that I tell the employees, and I say they're not here for the food. The food needs to be good, but the comedy needs to be great. The comedy needs to be great. That's the only reason people come here, because there's great restaurants all over Salt Lake City and Ogden and all over Utah. But man, the thing that separates us, hopefully, is the comedy.
So the comedy in Utah, I mean, you're a mom and pop comedy. You're not a franchise. You get out there, you book them yourself. Have you ever had like a comic say, no, I'm not coming to Salt Lake, Utah? I mean, has Utah been a problem at all?
Utah's not a problem at all. There are many instances though.
But what you know what I mean by saying, oh gosh, Utah's just a bunch of, inbred people.
There was some of that in the beginning. There was some hesitance. And I talk to the agents a lot of time, and sometimes I'll have to say, cause I'll say, hey, I want to bring in, you name the comic. Louis C.K., cause he's played Wiseguys. Bill Burr. I'll name the comic. They go, how's Utah going to handle him? And I'll say, well, I had Bob Saget here. Well, I had Jim Norton here.
And Bob Saget's pretty filthy these days.
Exactly. I mean, so I'm able to use other comics as leverage to get another comic that perhaps that I'm pursuing, as far as to be part of the lineup.
Is there a comic that you haven't had play Wiseguys that you would just love to get to perform?
Dude, I am this close to getting Colin Quinn, and I love Colin Quinn. In my top 10 comics, Colin Quinn is number 2. There's Don Rickles and there's Colin Quinn. And I love Colin. And I've tried many times. And I talked to him when I went out to New York, and I saw him at the Comedy Cellar, which is where, when Louis on the show, Louis C.K., when Louis on, that's the stage. And I talked to him out there. I said, I got to get you to come out. He said, yeah, I need to come out. But he just doesn't like leaving the city a lot. But I think I've got him coming at the beginning of 2014. Is that what it is next year? So yeah, I think I've got him. And he's the guy I've been pursuing, honestly, for 7 or 8 years.
Do you still kind of do that? Yes, I scored that when you land a show for somebody. Do you still get excited? I'm sure. Right?
Yes, especially if it's someone that I like a lot.
Yeah.
There's some comics that I may not dislike, but I'm not necessarily a fan, but I'm aware of them and I understand why they're famous. But there's some especially for me, that I really enjoy.
I'm sure,
that's a nice reward when I go, man, I got this guy coming in or girl coming in and I love them and I'm a fan. And that's nice that I can make it happen, because it's not as easy as saying, hey, I want this person to come perform at Wiseguys, because it also has to time up with their, there's scheduling issues with what else they have going with their college gigs, TV gigs they've got going, and other club work or auditions. So to actually get it to happen to where they're actually gonna be here at Wiseguys on a certain week, it's a lot of work getting that to happen and have it feel like I'm threading the needle half the time.
What do you think of the local comedy scene? I mean, obviously you're really supportive of it. That's one thing I wanted to even personally tell you, that, I've noticed you give the local comics a chance, if that's fair to say.
I think it is fair to say. And I'll tell you why. One of the things when I went to open a comedy club, when I decided this is what I was going to do, there were things that I wanted to make it affordable for people to come see the shows. And some people may think the tickets are expensive, but go see these same acts in Vegas and you'll see how cheap they are.
Great prices.
But I also want to give opportunities to comedians and young guys to get on stage, not just at open mic night, but at the big shows. But they have to show that they're working hard. And because what's difficult is that if you got a new guy and you have someone like, I don't know, Dice, you name them, whoever it is, someone that's famous.
Yeah.
The opener can't be horrible. So they have to work their way up to the point where they're able to open. However, you got to give them that shot. And if they've shown that they're working towards that, I love giving them that shot, because there's nothing more exciting than having the opportunity to open for someone that maybe is one of your idols, or someone that you look up to and you go, I can't believe I've been doing open mic nights and I'm sharing the stage
with somebody else.
Yeah. With someone that you go, I saw that guy on TV. That guy was on Letterman last week.
Well, I mean, I've had many comedians on the podcast before talk about, their opportunities, going, I had, Travis Tate. He just recently, headlined a show at the, West Valley Wiseguys, and he was talking, I'm pretty sure it was him talking about, going and eating with Mark Maron at Village Inn or something like that, just opportunities like that. And it's like, that is so awesome that, Wiseguys has created an opportunity to let, it's like, hey, you know what? You could be just as successful here in comedy as New York City or LA.
Well, it's good to have FaceTime with these guys. So when you do go to LA or New York, you'll see Mark Maron. You go, hey, Mark, how you doing? And
they know,
and they'll know you instead of you walking up cold and he has no idea who you are.
Yeah.
So it's good. And that's, when I lived in Los Angeles and I was doing open mic nights, I used to go hang out mainly at the Improv, which was on Melrose. And I did a lot of that and a lot of hanging out. And I think you have to be funny and you have to work hard and you have to write jokes. You have to have stuff. But at the same time, there's a business side of it. And I think the exposure that some of the comics get to some of these bigger name comics that are from out of town is invaluable.
Yeah. I also wanted to, before I lose you here, the Stubbs cast, your podcast, is it done? Is it on a hiatus?
No, you know what?
What's the story?
You know what? It's a long story, but no, it's not done.
I loved it.
Did you listen to it?
I did.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Holy smoke.
I loved it.
Why didn't you tell me that before? You know what? I'll lay it out. I'll tell you exactly what's going on.
Podcasting is horrible. I mean, it's very, you're not making any money.
No money.
But you do it because you love it.
That's not it. But I do have so much going on with my own shows. I headline and do a lot of shows myself. I do a lot of corporate stuff that people don't even kind of see.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of gigs myself.
You're a busy guy.
Between that and the clubs and the family, trying to squeeze the podcast in is difficult. However, I am going to start it back up like in the next week or so. But I was going at a nice rhythm. It's tough to continue when you get nothing.
Yeah. Well, I put out 2 shows a week.
That's brutal.
And when I first
You're not making any money?
No, not making any money doing it. I do it out of the pure passion of love of Salt Lake. Mm-hmm. Occasionally, might get a donation or something like that from people, that love what I do. And I've been doing it for over a year, over 110, 15 episodes I've done. I find consistency is the key. I will tell you that doing a podcast.
What? I think it's the fact that I was doing radio for 8.5 years. I was getting up at 4 a.m. doing radio. And then I got canned in May. And then I decided to gear my podcast up even more. And it was during the summer, and I kind of got fried a little bit. That's what it was.
You should get one of the local comedians here to head it up and just, I don't know. Do something like that.
It's coming back.
And then you kind of...
I will tell you, I do enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
Because I enjoy broadcasting in general.
Well, and that's the thing. I've always loved playing radio, and this is as close as I think podcasts are the future, man. Radio's on its way. I mean, look at the comedians that do podcasts. I mean, look at Mark Maron. I mean, the guy, I think the podcast has helped him.
I agree with that. And I think that radio itself, look.
You did radio.
I did 8.5 award-winning years, by the way. But it became more music intensive and less about being an entertainer. And I'm a comic and I'm an entertainer. I'm not a DJ. And they wanted a DJ. They want a guy to go, hey, that was this is that. Hey, it's 82 degrees and tomorrow's whatever. That's not my thing. I'm more of what we're doing right here.
Yeah. And I love this. This is why I do it. I get to meet people in Salt Lake. When would I have had a chance to sit down with Keith Stubbs?
You know what? I apologize. And I'll say this. We have scheduled this before and I felt horrible that we didn't get it done. I'm glad we could finally do this.
I'm glad to finally meet you, man. I'm finally glad to meet you. What do you like about Salt Lake? I always ask this about people coming on. I mean, the podcast is Salt Lake City based. I am Salt Lake. I always am curious, you said you lived in Ogden, but you spend a lot of time in the area. I mean,
I'm in Salt Lake every single day.
What do you like about it besides your comedy club? What are some other things you love about it?
I love the beauty. I love the people. I love the fact that the city's starting to grow. I like the way it's evolving.
So you like the direction it's going?
I do like the way it's going. I think it was a little closed.
Okay.
As an understatement. And I believe it's more open. And I like what's happening. I enjoy what's happening. And I'm actually working on, a theater that's my latest project in downtown.
Like for plays or something?
No, comedy, but a theater.
Like a movie theater.
Yeah, but it'll be Wiseguys Theater.
Nice.
And that's what I'm working towards right now.
So would you change anything about the city? You say you like the way it's evolving, but do you wish it would evolve in a certain direction that maybe it's not?
No, I'm good with it. I think it's exciting. Yeah. I'll tell you the planners, they seem to have it. They seem to have it together, man.
Yeah.
I can't give any advice.
Well, no. I was just curious. Keith Stubbs.
I wouldn't mind having a club license.
So, you serve beer here.
I have full liquor here, but I have a restaurant with liquor license, which means I have to sell a certain percentage of food. Getting a liquor license, like a club license.
Is that tough in Utah?
Oh, it's almost impossible to get. They're very limited. And that would be, if there was one thing that I could change, I guess that would be one that would benefit me, but I think it would also benefit a lot of businesses.
The economy.
Yeah.
I mean, more, people like to go out and drink.
Right.
And why not? If they're going to buy it here, they're going to buy it somewhere else. They might as well support you. They might as well support your business. I mean, you're keeping the money here local.
So there's a bunch of different types of licenses, and the one I have is restaurant with liquor. There is a club license, which is you can just sell liquor.
So what would it take you to get a club license?
It would take, there's 17 or 18, I was told, other businesses vying for one license per month. Mm-hmm. There's just not the availability. They would have to actually change the law to make more licenses available. It's based on population, all these other factors. And they need to, I believe, or it would be nice if they would loosen it up a little bit so that it was more available, especially for me.
Do you see it ever becoming available?
I think it will.
Eventually.
I do think
they're loosening up a little bit.
Yeah,
they really are.
It truly has.
They really are. Another question I ask everybody that comes on, and I mean, obviously you have food here, you got delicious food, mm-hmm. but I always like to ask people, do you have any favorite places you like to eat around town? Other favorite, local cafes or restaurants, or favorite eating spots? And if I don't ask you, I'm going to have listeners be like, why didn't you ask Keith where he likes to eat besides,
You know what? That's not a good question for me, because I either eat at Wiseguys or at my house.
Yeah. So
I don't really go out to other restaurants. I just don't have time.
Yeah.
To go out to other restaurants. There is a restaurant called Bistro 258 in Ogden that I do frequent, which is
there
great.
You go. See,
there's another one called Roosters in Ogden.
Delicious food.
On historic 25th Street, which I also enjoy. But that's about it, because I live up there.
Anything else? What's in store for Keith? You mentioned the theater. You got the theater thing you're working on. I mean, I guess probably the best way is just follow you online to keep up with all your different projects.
Yeah, KeithStubbs.com. I'm doing a lot of gigs, I'm performing a lot myself. I mean, that's the reason Wise Guys even exists is because I'm a comic and been doing lots of shows. I just worked with Joan Rivers and Jeff Foxworthy, and I'm doing some.
You're living the dream, man.
You know, those are big moments for me. I mean, they really. When I opened for Joan Rivers about 6 months ago at Kingsbury Hall,
I remember that. Yeah.
And she was amazing, and she was just she's intimidating as can be.
I could imagine,
but she couldn't have been nicer and very complimentary and really enjoyed me. And it was intimidating knowing that I was working with her is scary enough, but she stood off to my left as I was on stage the whole time doing my set, and the place was sold out, and I could see her, and she was actually laughing during my set. And that was really, that was a good moment for me, because I've been doing this for a long time, and it felt good to, like, there was some nice validation from, to me, one of the great comics of all time. She's 79 years old. She's a workaholic.
And she's still getting after it, man. She
stood right there. She didn't go in the green room, but she stood not 20 feet from me. And you guys couldn't see her because you're in the audience, but I could see out of my peripheral that she was there. And I kind of looked over a couple times, and she was laughing. And man, those are the rewards. Those moments like that are the ones that kind of,
you're like,
they keep you going. They really do. Because there's a more disappointment and more frustration than validation in comedy, I believe. And so moments like that really do resonate with me. And I try to do a better job of appreciating those moments, because they are far and few. I think you can sometimes get wrapped up into so many different things, but I do try to, and I don't always do, but I do try to take pause and appreciate moments and appreciate situations more than I used to. Otherwise, why even do any of this? So.
Absolutely. How else can people find you online? You're on Twitter?
I am on Twitter at the Keith Stubbs. I didn't put the on there because I'm trying to be fancy. Someone else had it.
And you got funny tweets. I recommend following you.
I would recommend following me too, but sometimes I get so frustrated. Can I get a retweet for the crying out loud? What's it called?
I'll give you a few retweets.
But I do Twitter, and I do a lot of gigs, and I'm doing shows all over the place, and I do appreciate the support. I appreciate you having me on the podcast.
Yeah.
We are a local business, and we are just run by, me. My wife runs the Ogden Club. She's there every weekend, and it's truly a family-owned business.
Yeah, that's great.
That's trying to.
And what's the website for Wise Guys? So people
it's wiseguyscomedy.com.
So check that out. I mean, you got a lot of really good names. I mean, you got Steve-O coming up. I mean, you got, Bill
Bellamy, Tracy Morgan.
I mean,
Drew Carey's coming back.
Yeah. I mean, you got some good names. Yeah. So, anything else you want to add before we close here?
Once again, thanks for having me on. I apologize profusely for the delay.
You're good.
I feel truly, that's why I reached out. I said, can we get this thing done? Because it's bothering me. I really want to get this done. So I appreciate you having me on.
Many thanks goes out to Keith Stubbs for coming on this episode of the podcast and sharing his story. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I know I had a great time chatting with him. Again, you can find all the links to connect with him at iamsaltlake.com/118. Follow him on Facebook, Twitter. Go to the wiseguyscomedy.com. Find out what comedians are going to be coming there in the very near future. And go see a comedy show. I mean, he's got some great acts coming through there. Go support them and see what they're all about. I'd also love to hear your feedback via voicemail. The voicemail line is always open, 385-202-5926. I'd love to know your thoughts on this episode or any of the other episodes of the I Am Salt Lake podcast. If you would like to be a guest on a future episode, drop me an email, iamsaltlake@gmail.com. Let me know what you're all about. Let me know what you're doing, and I'd possibly love to bring you on and have you share your story with the rest of Salt Lake City. There's a few ways you can support the show. Those are all found at iamsaltlake.com/support. Any support is much appreciated, and many thanks to those of you that have been supporting the podcast, keeping the podcast moving forward. I'm loving doing this, but your support is greatly appreciated. Anyways, that's going to do it for this episode 118. Hopefully you guys are having a great November. Get out and enjoy the city. You guys have a great day.